Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Zapinski. I am going to just talk to you about something amazing that happened to me yesterday. I know probably you read the news and are following all the politics, but if you live here, or if you're someone like me, you concentrate on your own life, okay? And you try to not look at the big public things going on, but look at your own life. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, the other lifeguard, who's a swim teacher, and she substitutes for me as a lifeguard, asked me if I was available Wednesday night from something like 7 to 9:30. And I said, yeah, fine. You know, I looked at my calendar, I can do it. And I found out later, she told me it's not here, it's at another place, another farm. And it wasn't for work, it was to enjoy. So I figured a party to bless this new farm. And she said she'd pick me up and all this. And I asked her, should I bring food? And she said no. So I went, and someone picked me up. And it turned out it was a surprise party for me. And like 8 of my friends were there, and they rented this new farm that had a private little pool, and they had dinner, and they gave me a party, and they gave me brachot, blessings, each one of them, and they played a game where I had to they put like a clue on my head, and I had to guess what they were talking about, and it was just amazing, and I was so moved, and I felt like a queen for like 3 hours. It was a new farm. A family moved into this new hilltop with their flock of sheep, or goats, I think, and built a small pool. And I have a tent there with like couches for guests. And it's wild. And it was so relaxing. And they had wine. And, you know, we have these moments of life here as newcomers where you do have friends. And even though I feel lonely a lot, and I'll always feel like an outsider, always. And don't let anyone fool you. You know, when you make aliyah, you're an immigrant, and you're an immigrant forever. But build your life. Build it the best way you can. And even a few friends that you see now and then. To do something like that in the middle of their lives, which are busy, to be with me, it was very, very moving. I cried. It was very special. We'll be right back.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Welcome back to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Zapinski. I just want to go on a little bit because I didn't get to say everything I wanted to say. And I have been getting a few requests recently to talk more about my life here. Some people enjoy it. And I guess it gives you a little bit of a insider's view of life here. But let me go on. Let me just make a point. Years ago, I was in the States. And I was there for work, fundraising, meeting people, doing speaking events. That's what I do when I go. And I try to see family when I'm there. And I timed it so well. I got there in time for a graduation party of my husband's, or my niece, okay, his brother's daughter, so my niece. And she was 18, and it was her senior graduation party. And I was kind of not so close. I was maybe an hour away. It was in Philadelphia, and I was in New York. But I said, oh, close enough. I'll go. And I remember this so well. It was at a country club. I went, and there were a lot of people, maybe 300 people. all spread out, inside, outside. These were not religious people. And my husband's family is not religious. And, they were like spread out. They weren't all together. They were like, the kids were here and his brother and wife were at this table and his mother was over here and all over. And I was alone. And the kids, my nieces and nephews, they really don't know us. And, Facebook is a substitute, and it's a great substitute, and it's a great tool. And so I recognized them, and maybe they recognized me, but did I feel like a foreigner? And I ran up to them and I hugged them and all that. And I went from person to person, table to table. But I left early and I was in tears because I felt like an outsider. And this is my own family. When I said earlier that you will always feel like a foreigner here, I'm just being honest, and that should not scare anyone, because all of us in our ancestral line, there's always been a foreigner. Jews were immigrants. There was no Israel. So in America, our first generation, they're just like I am. And it's a price, but it's worth it. It is a price I pay. We all do. And you have to be willing. And I don't feel like it's a price. I don't feel that. But when I was talking to my friends last night, they asked me, they're all Israeli. They said, Natalie, what is it like to be an olah chadash? Is it hard for you? What did you think? They said this. What did you think of us when you came here? It was so funny. All this attention on me, which I'm not used to. It was very moving that not only did they plan this big surprise, but that they just focused on me like that. It was a bit overwhelming. And it reminded me of that time I was in the States and I just was telling you about how I was a foreigner, because being here, being a foreigner, will always be foreigners, but here I do have a life. And I was telling you this, I have built a life. Everyone who comes here builds their life. And you need to focus and build your life. And after 15 years, I have a life here. I do. I have friends who did a surprise party for me. That's a life. I don't know if I necessarily would have had friends like that if I had stayed in America. I had one best friend, There's a movie I saw a couple years ago that reminds me of this all. It's called Interstellar. I don't think I've spoken to you about it. And it's amazing. It's about a scientist, and he sees the world is burning. The earth is burning. So he goes to explore to find a new world, a new place where they can start human life. And when he leaves, every minute is something like 7 years. So when he left, his daughter was 9 years old. And when he came back, she was a grandmother. And she was in the hospital bed with all her family gathered around her because she was dying. Now, the last time he saw her, which was just, not long ago, I'm saying hours ago, maybe a day, she was 9 years old. So he had missed her whole life. And when he saw her again, she was in the hospital bed, and he had to tell her who he was. She knew who he was because she knew about that. She was a scientist also. And they had been in touch a little bit on the computer. But he said, something to her, and then he stepped back, and all her family gathered around her. And that's how I felt at that party, like an outsider. I had to step back and let all the family continue without me. And it hurt. It did hurt. And, it hurt. So I'm a big girl, and I cried, and I got over it. And I realized, okay, that's a hardship. That's part of being an adult. There are painful parts of life. There are prices to pay when you make decisions. But I think it's worth it. And I think all the Jews need to come here and make that decision and that big step and say goodbye and come here, because there is such a life here to build. You make good friends here. You will. And they'll help you. It's so funny. Everyone who comes on this show talks about all the people who help them. And I sometimes say to them, stop talking about coming here with your hand out. We're not here waiting to take care of you. Come here and work. I guess it's a little harsh, but it is true. This isn't a charity country. Come here and build. Come here and build your life. But it is true that people will help you. And when I say help, it doesn't mean they're going to make you food every day or anything, but they do understand because they all have immigrants in their families. And that's what was so interesting to me last night when these women said to me, Natalie, Natalie, I remember when my mother was an olah chadash. And they remember. They don't remember. They weren't alive. But they may remember the struggles that their mother went through, the way my children watch me. They may remember the accent that their parents had and maybe the help they needed on the phone, reading the mail, reading the letters from the teacher, going to meetings. It's true. We all need help with that. I need help with that. Maybe in 10 more years I won't. But there's just some things, there's a cultural difference. I told the girls last night, whenever there's a B'nai Akiva event, and every year there's a big B'nai Akiva, week of B'nai Akiva, and there's a ceremony, and all the yeshuvs gathers on the sport court, and they sing the B'nai Akiva song with the children. I don't know it. And I told them this, and they were laughing. They laughed because they understood. I think they said, yeah, you don't know it. And they understood, but they don't know how painful it is to stand there and you're the only one out of 1,000 people who doesn't know the song, don't know the words. And not just do I not know the words, I have no memories like they have. But okay, that is part of the price. And all of you listening who are considering aliyah, does that sound so bad? I mean, is that such a heavy price? I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. There is also the land of Israel, just the land of Israel, not politics or anything you see on the news. Being here, whether you're religious or not, is amazing. It is so pure. This place they took me. It's, it's off. We went off road, no signs or anything. And these people are building their dream. And this happens everywhere. This isn't so unusual. This happens all throughout Israel, all throughout Yehuda and Shomron. There are new families and new farms and shepherds all over. This is a lifestyle. It is an acceptable lifestyle. There are people older than me, in their 60s. They did this, and their children go and they start another hilltop. It is so awesome to have these people with such spirit, such pioneering spirit. I love it. I love that more than anything. It's I don't have the words for it, but it just makes every materialistic thing so irrelevant, and you don't need it. All you need is to sit on a hill with some coffee. I mean, and that's a birthday here. I mean, it's amazing. And it's just so funny. A friend of mine from Efrat wants to go. I showed her a picture and she wants to come, and, she's a fancy lady, but she loves this stuff too. It's like living in a place where you can always have a wild adventure, and it's just minutes away, and you don't need to prepare much, and you don't need to book a hotel. You sleep outside. It's totally normal. It's just great. But there are these moments here, and that's one of them. And you make these friendships through moments. And it's like snapshots of your life, and it goes so fast. Your life does go fast here, but you come and you build and you work, and it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. All right, stick around. We have a great guest for you, a songwriter. Very excited. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Simento from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together, we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Simento, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay. Welcome back to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Sapinski. I told you we have a songwriter, and that's who she is. I have a woman from South Africa who moved to Israel when she was 34 years old in 2017. She is living, I think, in Pardes Chanah, recently married, and apparently released a song that has been a big, big hit. We're going to ask her all about her aliyah story. Shira Ben Avraham, is that right?
Hi, yes, that's right.
Wonderful. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Returning Home.
Thank you.
I was introduced to you through a common friend, Aliza, who's on our show a lot, and she told me she met you. So let's work backwards. Tell me how you met her, because she's also an olah chadash.
Well, actually made contact with her through a mutual friend who put her in touch with us, because we live in Pardes Chanah, and they recently made aliyah to Pardes Chanah. So we were in touch online last year already. And then when they finally arrived in Pardes Chanah a few months ago, we met at a community event, and we hit it off. And
so that's great.
Our husbands are actually learning Torah together. Like, they have a chavrita together once a week now.
That's so nice. You really have a little community there of English speakers. Yafeh.
Indeed, yeah. It's a wonderful little Anglo community here in Pardes Chanah.
So tell us how you got there.
Well, it depends where you would like me to start, because the story started in South Africa. But basically, once I got to Israel, I went straight to Nachlaot, Jerusalem, because that's where I felt the pull to. And that's where I met my husband. We got married.
Let's stop. Let's stop and go. Let's stop. Let's go back even further, because there are people who, they still ask me, why did you move to Israel? Why did you move to Israel? So tell me, let's go back. Because coming to Israel is a lot harder than moving to a specific place in Israel. Once you're here, you're here, Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, about your background, what brought you here?
Right. So in a nutshell, I was born to a Christian family in Pretoria, South Africa. And during my childhood, my parents started questioning Christian dogma and looking deeper into the Bible, into the Torah. And my father specifically felt very puzzled by certain contradictions that he found when he read the Christian Bible, also referred to as the New Testament by Christians, and he saw discrepancies between that and the Torah, the Old Testament, as they call it. And he really made a study of this. Like, most of my childhood, I remember him studying this, and he started writing a book. And his search led him closer and closer and closer towards Judaism and away from Christianity. So that's how I grew up. And in my high school years, we started keeping kosher and having Shabbat dinners on a Friday night, but in a very non-halachic way. But really, my parents had a heart for Torah, and they had a lot of love and respect for Israel, and that's how they raised me.
Wow. So let me ask you something. When you had Shabbat dinners, was it just your family, or did you connect to another family who was going through the same thing?
It was really just our family. And at different times, my parents did have contact with different communities. Some were Messianic communities. Some were just Christian communities who were exploring their Jewish roots. So we, at different times, had contact with different communities like that, but we never made contact with the Jewish community in South Africa. I think my parents felt a little intimidated, or they weren't sure that they could make contact, you know. So that it was just really our family who did it together. And so that's how I grew up. And at some point, you know, we stopped going to church, and we were sort of a little bit like isolated in this sort of strange sort of twilight zone somewhere between Christianity and Judaism.
Right.
But my parents found some community, and they felt comfortable there. But then when I was around like late 20s, I think I was around 28, 29, I came to a point in my life where I sort of lost inspiration. I had started a music career in South Africa, but then as soon as I kind of released my album, I, for some reason, completely lost inspiration. I felt very disoriented, and I decided that I needed to leave South Africa in search of new inspiration. So I joined the company that transferred me to Australia, to Melbourne, Australia. And as soon as I got there, I suddenly realized, well, I'm going to have to figure out what I believe now, because my parents aren't here to like give me some framework for spirituality or my belief system. And so I really started deepening my search at that point, and that's when I made contact.
Slow down. You were in your 20s, or
I was in my late 20s.
All right.
So at that point, I realized that I'd somehow managed to move into a Jewish community in Melbourne. And so I suddenly noticed that there were Jewish people around, and I made contact with them and asked them, you know, I would start making inquiries about learning Hebrew, because I thought that the only way that I was really going to be able to figure out what I really believe was by reading the Torah in Hebrew to see what it really meant. So I was very ambitious, and I started taking some Hebrew classes with one of these ladies that I had made contact with. But she very soon realized that I was really interested in Judaism and the religion more than just the language. And so she invited me to shul, and so in 2013, on Simchat Torah, I walked into shul for the first time. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of dancing, a lot of l'chaim going on, and everybody was very friendly. And from then on, I started attending shul every now and then. And you know, about 2 years later, as I became more and more involved with the community, I decided to convert. And then another 2 years later, I completed my conversion through Orthodox base then in Melbourne. During my conversion, I visited Israel for the first time, felt very much alive, but I didn't know how I would be able to come and live here. So I returned to Melbourne, completed my conversion, and just at around the end of my conversion, I actually lost a client who was my main parnasa at the time, and it was very scary for me. I didn't know how I was going to make a living. So I started looking around online, and I found a job teaching online for a university in Australia that had an online wing. And once that fell into place, I realized, well, I guess now I can go and live in Israel, because now I can work anywhere in the world. Right. So as soon as my conversion completed, I packed up my bags, I put all my possessions into storage facility, and I came to Israel. I didn't know if I was going to be able to stay, because when I made inquiries about making aliyah, the Jewish agency told me that I have to stay in the community where I converted for 9 months, then get a reference letter from a rabbi, and then only can I make aliyah. But then I heard a rumor that if I come to Israel, then there's an organization here called ETIM that can help converts to make aliyah here before those 9 months are over, to make aliyah from Israel. So I came on a 3-week ticket on a tourist visa, and I made inquiries as soon as I arrived, and they told me, yes, they can help me. So I stayed on, and a few months later, I just had all my things shipped on a lift, and I applied to make aliyah, and about a year later, it was approved. And during that year, I met my husband, and when the aliyah was finally approved, it was a week before our wedding. So we got married. We got married in 2018, Then we lived in Achot for another 10 months, and then we moved to Pardes Chanah.
Stop right there. First of all, this is, okay, everyone listening, this is such a great story. This is everything I'm always telling you. If you put one foot in front of the other, you just keep going. And that's what Shira did. I do not hear any hesitancy in any of your story. I don't hear that you had doubt. I don't hear that you went around wringing your hands, panicking, or anything. It sounds like you just saw like the goal, and you saw the target, and you just shot that target, and you just kept going and running kadima, forward.
Indeed.
And that is awesome. That is just awesome.
Thank you.
Now, I think a lot of it has to do with your maturity. You're a musician, first of all. Now, musicians are special people. They're creative. They're artistic, and they have a deep soul, I guess is the word. They're in touch. Musicians just are, okay? And you are one, and you knew, and you felt it, obviously.
I definitely felt an intuition, and to be honest, I'm somebody who likes to have things very planned out and kind of controlled in my life. But this was like a time in my life where I really felt like I had to take a leap of faith, even though I had no certainty about how things were going to play out. Wow. I felt very strongly that I had to come, and I couldn't, and I knew I couldn't. I just felt I couldn't wait those 9 months in Melbourne. I had to come. I felt like my husband was waiting for me, and I was right.
Yeah, you did. There are all these questions, but they're so negligible. I mean, where did you find a place to live? How did the people today? They go crazy over these little stupid things, and who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? You get here, you make it. You find your way. Nachon, you did. It's not even relevant.
Right. It's like my husband and I often talk about this idea of like Nachshon Mabinadav. I never know how to say that right. But he was the one who first walked into the sea, and the sea parted, and he went up to his nose, and it was only then that the sea parted. And it's very much the same concept in certain things in life, that you have to take a major leap of faith, and then things fall into place.
Yes, you need to keep your shoulders straight and steady and walk with confidence. And again, I mean, not be an idiot. Look right and left before you walk into the street, but walk.
Yeah.
Nachon. Yofi, stay with us. We're going to be taking a break. I know there's probably now a whole Israel story you're going to tell me. This is very exciting. This is so great. I'm so glad you're with us. Stay here. All of you listening, please don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, I am Walter Bingham. If you want to hear the news behind the news and the true perspective on world affairs, then the Walter Bingham File is the program for you. We bring you interviews with the movers and shakers, political commentaries, and on-the-spot reports of events as they happen. All here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Israel time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it's all archived on our website. Make it a date.
Welcome back to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Sapinski, and we're continuing our talk today with Shira Ben Avraham, who made aliyah from South Africa. She is a musician, and we're just talking how she had these different obstacles drop into her lap, and instead of crawling into a corner and crying about it and feeling sorry for herself, she used and we could say hardship, failure, challenge, everything that happened to her. She lost her job. She lost her funding. She lost her sponsorship. she did something with it. She spun it around and said, okay, I'm going to find something online. And she found something online, and now I can go to Israel. I don't want to stay here. She got up and left. Amazing. This is a lesson all of you need to take. Okay? The Hashem is involved. It is so obvious. He is involved in America today with the anti-Semitism that is spiking. What is he saying? Is he saying, oh, it'll go away? Is he saying, oh, just wait a little longer? No. He's saying, come home. Come home. Okay, Shira, back to you. Sorry, I had to get that out. And I apologize to everyone listening to my horrible voice. I sound like Tina Turner, but I have been guarding at the pool and I scream a lot. I don't have the patience for the microphone. Sometimes I just start yelling. So I'm losing my voice. Shira, take it away. We're going to hear your Israel story. After you came here, you met your husband. Take it away.
Right. So I came to Nachlaot, Jerusalem, and I just really found like a shared little apartment that I shared with a few other young ladies. And I moved in, and I was working online, and I just, hung around Nachlaot, made some friends, and I'd actually seen my husband in shul during my first trip to Israel while I was still converting. I'd sort of seen him from afar. He's like a very sort of big sort of person you can't really miss in Nachlaot. He was like I always say he was the Prince of Nachlaot because everybody knew him. So I'd seen him on that trip, and then finally, after a few months of living in Nachlaot, once I converted and moved here, we were introduced, and he was actually hosting a third meal in his apartment, and I was invited along. And so I walked into his house, and he just immediately felt attracted to me. And a few months later, we bumped into each other, and he asked me out for coffee. But before that, he invited me again for a third meal before we could go out for the coffee. So I went that chadash again for third meal. And he said that night, we kind of went into Malav and Malka, and we had like a jam, like guitars and djembes and stuff. He said that night he heard what he describes as like a bat call. It's like a voice from heaven that just told him, this is your wife. And he said it wasn't like, oh, this is somebody I want to marry or somebody I'd like to marry. It's like, this is your wife, and you're going to spend the rest of your life with her. And, from that night on, he started treating me as if I was his wife. And he played no games. He just was very straight up. Like he told me that night, he walked me home. He told me that night, I'm playing for keeps. And it was another answer to my prayer because, at that point I was already 34 years old. And I was becoming, until that time I'd felt, I knew I wasn't ready to get married. But then I knew, like, now's the time. And for some reason, I'd always had this idea that I would get married at the age of 35. So when I was, like, nearing my 35th birthday, I was beginning to get, like, anxious. And I really prayed very hard at that point in my life for clarity, and that when I meet my husband, that we would both know, that there would be no doubt, no fear, nothing, that we would just both know that it was the right thing, and that's exactly what happened. So we met, and we started dating. Very soon, we were talking about marriage. We got engaged. He came to South Africa to meet my parents. I flew to New Jersey with him to meet his parents, and we got married almost exactly a year after I moved to Israel, and 1 week exactly after my aliyah finally came through. So there was quite a bit of paperwork to go through, like quite a lot of red tape, because I'm a convert and because I moved to Israel before, the sort of probation period in the community that I converted in was completed as it had been recommended to me. So there was some red tape to get through. The team they were very, very helpful. They sent representatives with me to Misrada Panim every time. But it was a process, and I never really had certainty that it would be approved. I didn't know how long it would take, but thankfully I had the tourist visa and I had the work, and I had a lot other things going on, including organizing a wedding. And so it was almost a surprise when the aliyah was approved a week before the wedding. Yeah. So it was great. Interestingly, I changed my name to my future surname on that day that I made aliyah. So then I took the surname Ben Avraham. because my husband also said that he wanted to take the surname Ben Avraham. His father's Hebrew name is Avraham. So only a few months after our wedding did he actually change his name officially to Ben Avraham. So he eventually took my surname in effect.
That's right.
Right, that's just a little
very modern. Okay, very modern. I just want to explain to our listeners a little bit about Nachalot, because you talk about it. Nachalot is a little neighborhood in Yerushalayim that's almost like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Shira, but I take it that it's kind of like an artist village type of place.
Yeah, it's very bohemian, sort of very close to the Shuk, the Machane Yehuda market. It's very bohemian. There's a lot of artists who live there. Also, a lot of young people go there because there's a big single scene happening there.
So, and when you came here and you say how you are invited to meals, I love this, because if you're not religious, you don't understand that. Shabbat in the religious world is a day of vacation for everyone. It's not a day. It's a day of rest, but there's like an order to the day, and it's so great because it's ordered, and everyone, especially when you're single, okay, you go to shul. It's social. That's where you see people, and that's where you are seen, right? And then there are meals. Exactly. You have the morning, you have the Friday night meal before, after shul, and it's just so beautiful because it's holy. But it's like healthy, it's people are together celebrating Shabbat. There's nothing materialistic or commercial about it. It's so simple. It's singing, it's praying, and eating, and there are things you need to do. You just all know what to do. You say the bracha and you wash your hands and you don't talk and all these little things you learn as you become religious. And it's so beautiful to do it here. Your story is so moving to me because you were alone and so new at all of this, and you did one foot in front of the other right into the arms of your husband, and he probably saw you for exactly who you were. Because you can see who's new. You see it. And he probably loved it. He probably loved you on first sight because you're brave. You're brave. And people say that about me, and I totally dismiss it. They use the word ometz. It means courage. They used this last night at my party. They said ometz. And I don't even know what to say to that. Like, what do you mean, courage? But it is hard what you did. Moving into everything was new. Being Jewish was new. New country, new religion, new identity, new name.
Right. Name.
It's very exciting, and you did it. And okay, so I just kol hakavod to you, really kol hakavod. Thank you. And everyone listening, it's such a beautiful story. And go on, because you have more success afterwards. Tell us what you're doing since then.
Well, since then, after we got married, we lived in Nachlaot for about 10 months in my husband's bachelor flat. So that same apartment that I walked into that day on Shabbat, on third meal when we first met, that became my home. We lived there. And then we needed more space, and I wanted to be more in nature and have more green around. So we moved out to Pardes Chanah, which is a wonderful, almost like a rural sort of feel to it. It feels like a town, but it's actually a city. And we moved out here where my husband already had some friends, great Anglo community. Here we are. We're living here now, making friends. The community is growing all the time. Like Aliza Bracha and Gershon moved in. It's like every couple of weeks there is a new Anglo family coming in. So it's really growing. It's very exciting. And so we're just trying to put down roots and really establish ourselves here. And about 2 years after we were married, almost exactly a year ago today, our son was born. So they have one boy. His name is Baruch.
Beautiful.
And so he's turning 1 year old on Shabbat. 2 days from now. So it's been quite a roller coaster, I have to say, from converting, becoming Jewish, then moving to Israel, then becoming a wife, then moving house, and then becoming a mother. It's like I'm about ready to sort of settle in a little bit. But something else that's really exciting in my life that's happening is I think you'll remember in the beginning of my story I mentioned that I sort of lost my inspiration and my music back in South Africa.
You're down to 30 seconds, so say it fast, Shira.
So as my journey evolved towards Judaism, towards Israel, my inspiration returned, Baruch Hashem. I started writing songs again, and I just released a song that I wrote about this journey, about making aliyah. It's called Land of Israel. You can find it on YouTube if you search for Shira Ben Avraham, Land of Israel. It's all about this journey and the excitement and the joy and the mystery of making aliyah and being brought up to the land and the return to the land. Now, I hope whoever listens to it will be inspired, either get strength from it if they've already made aliyah, or just hear the call, like, may Hashem call you home through the song.
Beautiful. Yafeh, amen. I will post it in our show notes so everyone can see that. I'm sure there's a link, and I'm looking forward to hearing it also. And it was so great to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Best of luck with everything. I hope we'll have you again, and we'll see what's going on in the next year. Yafeh ma'od.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.